Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. Here on Everyday Consent, we talk a lot about having conversations with our sexual or romantic partners about things like desires and boundaries. But sometimes those conversations can be really hard to start, especially if it's something you or your partners are not used to talking about. There are plenty of other conversations in life that can also be really hard to start. For example, if a friend or coworker made a racist joke and you want to let them know that it made you uncomfortable. Or your roommate keeps leaving dirty dishes around and you want to talk about your different cleanliness expectations. Or maybe a friend is drinking a lot more lately than they usually do, and you want to see if anything is going on with them. Having conversations like these can be really important and worthwhile. They help you understand where the other person is coming from, and any problems tend to be easier to solve if you talk through them. But oh boy, they can still be intimidating. Any of these subjects might be really touchy or personal, and there might be insecurity or strong emotion attached to them. You might be pretty afraid of how the other person will react when you start the conversation. Maybe they'll get really angry, or maybe really sad, or maybe they'll ridicule you for making a big deal out of it. And you have just no way of knowing. This gets even worse when you're thinking about a new relationship. That unfamiliarity can add an extra layer of worry for a few reasons. You might be afraid of alienating the person before you really get to know each other. You don't yet know how best to communicate with them in a way that you'll both understand each other. And since you don't know them as well, you're even less likely to know how they'll react to a touchy subject. If you're also in a whole new environment, like a new school or a new job, this gets even harder. You don't know what norms are already in place in that environment, so you don't know if you're violating them. These conversations are definitely important, but this is sounding pretty scary. Let me tell you about one of my recent struggles with this. I went to one of a consortium of liberal arts colleges in Claremont, California. One of the great things about liberal arts colleges in general, and Claremont in particular, is that there's a culture of talking about everything. Maybe too much. But I got used to students and other community members really having a voice in any change or event or policy. And I became confident in having an opinion and sharing it, and us all having a discussion and talking things through. I was very lucky and privileged to be in this environment, and I gained a lot of useful skills and confidence. As I entered the working world after graduation, I took those skills and confidence along with me, but I quickly noticed myself faltering unexpectedly. I had conversations with coworkers where somebody would say something kind of problematic that felt sexist, for example. I expected that it would spark a conversation and we'd have a discussion about it. But we wouldn't. We would just move on. I realized then that I had taken for granted the environment and the norms that were in place when I was in school, and that now I was trying to rely on an environment that wasn't there to start a discussion for me. A discussion that I wanted to have and wanted to be a part of, but didn't want to start. I had never had the most radical opinions before, so I would usually chime in later as a more moderate voice. But here I found myself surrounded by silence and without the structure and backup that I was used to. If there was going to be a discussion, I was going to have to start it, and maybe be the only person supporting my side. I knew I wanted to change the environment to have a more open discourse, but I didn't want to be some newbie coming in without any understanding of the existing culture saying, my way is the right way. I'm gonna fix this all for you, you're welcome. I ended up staying silent a lot more than I wanted to. Over time though, I started realizing that I was a part of this community too. If I'm spending my time here, then I'm a part of this culture, and that means I have a right to help form what that culture looks like. I had the right, but I also had the responsibility. I'm not the quietest of people. So if I was staying silent when I didn't want to, that probably meant that other people were too. And so maybe me speaking up could be the exact kind of structure and support that somebody else might need to join in the conversation. That same structure and support that I'd been lamenting the lack of. To be honest, this is something that I'm still working on and definitely am not perfect at yet. But basically, every time I find myself wanting to speak up and start a conversation, but afraid to do so, I find it helpful to keep this in mind. That I have a right and a responsibility to be a part of creating the cultures and relationships that I'm a part of. And knowing that helps me push through the fear to have those important conversations. Maybe you'll find it helpful too. Side note, this gets a lot more complicated if anyone's personal safety is at risk. I'm not going to get into that today, but please take care of yourself. And this applies to more than just largish communities like the workplace. Interpersonal relationships are kind of their own mini community. So, in much the same way, if you are in a relationship, then you are a part of that relationship. And that means that you get a say in what that relationship dynamic is going to look like. So if you want to be in a sexual relationship where you openly talk about consent, you have a right to assert that. And if you want to be in a roommate relationship where you look out for each other when something seems amiss, you get to assert that too. Of course, the other person gets a say just like you do, but you do get your own vote. So what about you? Does this sound like something you've experienced? What have you found difficult about starting conversations about consent or other potentially difficult topics? What have you found to be helpful in those situations? Let me know down in the comments, or you can always email me at everydayconsent@gmail.com. Happy consenting, folks. I'll see you next week. Liberal? Liberal. Liberal?
Liberal.
Liberal. Don't, like, do this while you're saying a line, Sarah. Jesus. That's distracting. Probably. I'm on a boat, guys. Liberal. Liberal.